Situated on the southern shore of the Absheron Peninsula, along the western shore of the Caspian Sea, Baku is the capital and commercial hub of Azerbaijan. The first historical reference to Baku dates from 885 CE, although archaeological evidence indicates a settlement there several centuries before Christ. By the 11th century CE, Baku was in the possession of the Shirvanshahs, who made it their capital in the 12th century, although for a period in the 13th and 14th centuries it came under the sway of the Mongols. In 1723 Peter the Great, the Tsar of Russia captured Baku, but it was returned to Persia in 1735. Russia captured it finally in 1806. In 1920, Baku became the capital of the Azerbaijan Republic. Nizami Street in Baku is a vibrant pedestrian-only thoroughfare, known for its mix of architectural styles, shopping, dining, and nightlife. It's considered a central hub for both locals and tourists, particularly in the evening. The walled old city, also known as Icheriseher, or inner city, or old town, is the historical center of ancient Baku. The historic area is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and a living vibrant city, with a rich history and diverse architectural influences. In December 2000, the old city of Baku, including the palace of the Shirvanshahs and Maiden Tower, became the first location in Azerbaijan to be classified as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The paired fortress gates, or Gosha Gala Gapisi, also sometimes called Shamakhi gates, have stood at the entrance of the old city for centuries, serving as a formidable barrier against invaders. The gates were constructed in the 12th century during the reign of the Shirvanshahs, a medieval dynasty that ruled over the region. There are numerous historical architectural monuments of the medieval period, such as caravanserais, hammams, mosques, and residential buildings of the 18th to 20th centuries, located within the fortified old city. During archaeological excavations conducted in 2016 by the Department of the State Historical and Architectural Reserve, an underground bathhouse dating back to the 17th century was discovered. The bath's premises are located below the ground level, which is typical for Baku hammams. This helped to maintain a constant temperature regime. The bath was presumably built at the beginning of the 17th century. During that period, the construction of baths at the entrances to the city was widespread, so that caravans and travelers could wash themselves before entering into the city. Water coming from the underground reservoir was heated in the boiler room. A duct laid horizontally from the upper part of the boiler room distributed heat to the bathrooms. There was a complex system of ceramic pipes installed under the floor and in the walls of the bathhouse. The bathhouse was heated both by the duct and by the ceramic pipes by which hot water was distributed along the walls. This bathhouse was in use for many years. In the heart of the old town, this easy-to-miss building pays subtle homage to the local cat population in Baku. The cat's house consists of two false windows and sandstone sculptures, one with a pair of children, a boy and a girl, looking up with a kitten, and another with a trio of cats. It was created by sculptor Tavadi Goliev in 1994. The Baku Museum of Miniature Books is the only museum of miniature books in the world. The museum started its operation on the 2nd of April 2002. In 2015, the museum was presented the certificate of the Guinness Book of Records as the largest private museum of miniature books. Located in the inner city of Baku, the Palace of the Shirvanshahs is a 15th century palace built by the Shirvanshahs and described by UNESCO as one of the pearls of Azerbaijan's architecture. In the 15th century, the Shirvanshah dynasty under Ibrahim I of Shirvan transferred his capital from Shimakha to Baku. Following a devastating earthquake, he committed himself to the construction of the palace. The construction of the residential building was started in 12th century. The building was extended later during the 14th to 15th centuries. The palace ensemble consists of 9 buildings: the palace, the Diwan Khana or the courthouse, the Dervishes Mausoleum, the Eastern Gate, the Palace Mosque, the Kikubad Mosque, the Palace Burial Vault, the Hammam, and the Ovdan or the Storage Lake. It has 2 floors. The building's upper floor served as a living space for Shah's family. It reflects distinctive architectural techniques and characteristics of Oriental palaces. The ground floor served the household needs of the palace. The museum's permanent exhibition provides insights into the history of the palace, the dynasty of the Shirvanshahs, and the culture of Azerbaijan. Murad's Gate is the only building of the 16th century in the complex. It was built during the reign of Sultan Murad by architect Amir Shah, under orders from the governor of Baku, Rajab Baba Bakovi. The magnificence of Icheriseher lies in the combination of its distinct architectural monuments and its historically composed architectural spatial planning with original street views, which have merged into a single entity to reflect its long history and the melding of cultures that have influenced its development over the past 9 centuries. Icheriseher is still a living, vibrant city with residential areas housing local communities. In old times, trade caravans arriving from Russia passed through the Shamakhi gates and left through the Salyan gates, whereas the trade caravans arriving from Iran entered through the Salyan gates and left through the Shamakhi gates. Built in the 18th or 19th centuries, Kasum Bek bathhouse is an ancient hammam. It was commonly known as the sweet bathhouse, due to the fact that sweets were served in the bathhouse along with tea. Located in the historic Icheriseher, the Jumma Mosque has been rebuilt several times. The present mosque was built in 1899, under the financing of Baku philanthropist merchant Haji Shikhlali Dadsho. There used to be a Zoroastrian temple here, till the 14th century. Bazaar Square or Khanqah complex is a historic religious architectural complex with arcade of 12th to 13th centuries. This pagan temple dates back to the 12th century and is believed to have once been a place of pilgrimage. The complex was discovered during archaeological excavations carried out in 1964 on the northern side of the Maiden Tower. The Maiden Tower is described as the most majestic and mysterious monument of Baku. The 12th century monument is built over earlier structures dating from the 7th to 6th centuries BC. It is a cylindrical 8-story structure that rises to a height of 29.5 meters, with a base diameter of 16.5 meters. The internal space available in the tower is said to be adequate to accommodate 200 people. The origins of the tower are shrouded in mystery. No one knows for certain when it was built, or what it was built for, or even how it acquired its name Maiden Tower. No written sources survive that record its construction or original function. The origin of the name Maiden Tower is steeped in many legends. Along with Azerbaijan, neighboring Iran, Turkey, Iraq and other countries also all have numerous towers, castles, and place names that incorporate the word Maiden. There are several theories about why it is used so often. One of the most common explanations is that the name was given to a defensive construction never captured by an enemy. However, history does not offer any proof of this. Anyone who knows anything about Baku's Maiden Tower has probably heard at least one legend about it. The most popular one here is about a young woman loved by a Shah, who would only agree to marriage if he first built a tower. Inspired by these legends, contemporary writers, poets, artists and other creative minds have also developed many new versions. The great significance of the Maiden Tower for the Azerbaijani people and their national culture is confirmed by it being the subject of films, the first one produced in 1924, and the first Azerbaijani ballet, staged in 1940. Scientific sources indicate that the Maiden Tower is a paramount example of Zoroastrianism and the pre-Islamic architecture. Some archaeological and architectural evidence suggests that the tower was a Zoroastrian fire temple, which had 7 fire exits on the top of the tower. The views from the top cover the alleys and minarets of the old city, the Baku Boulevard, the Isa Bek Hajinsky House, and a wide vista of the Baku Bay. Opened in 1960, the Baku funicular is the first and only funicular system in Azerbaijan. The Baramgur statue depicts the hero of Nizami Ganjavi's poem, The Seven Beauties. It shows the fifth ruler of the Sasanian dynasty, killing a snake-like dragon wrapped around his leg with a sword. Azerbaijan National Carpet Museum displays Azerbaijani carpets and rugs with historical and modern weaving techniques and materials. It has the largest collection of Azerbaijani carpets in the world. The structure of the building is intended to look like a rolled carpet. Designed by Austrian architect Franz Junz, the building took over 6 years to construct. The collection of the museum includes over 10,000 items of ceramics, metal works of the 14th century, jewelry from the Bronze Age, carpets and carpet items from the 17th to 20th centuries, national garments and embroidery, and applied artworks of the modern age. Known as chai, tea is integral to Azerbaijani life. It is served freshly brewed, hot and strong. The pear-shaped glass used is called amodu. Baku Boulevard, also known as National Park, is a promenade established in 1909, which runs parallel to Baku's seafront. Its history goes back more than 100 years, to a time when Baku oil barons built their mansions along the Caspian shore, and when the seafront was artificially built up inch by inch. In 1936, the parachute tower was built and used for extreme activities. However, the tower stopped functioning after a fatal accident in the 1960s, which led to the ultimate ban of parachuting from the tower. In 2008, the parachute tower was reconstructed and started to display wind speed, time, date, air and sea water temperature. The Caspian Sea is the world's largest inland body of water, described as the world's largest lake, and usually referred to as a full-fledged sea. It covers a surface area of 371,000 kilometers square, an area approximately equal to that of Japan, with a volume of 78,200 kilometer cubed. The sea's name stems from Caspi, the ancient people who lived to the southwest of the sea in Transcaucasia.